Welcome to Marriage with Joy, which is the most open discussion on the internet about the positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant aspects of living in harmony with matrimony. Marriage with Joy unabashedly discusses the most interesting questions raised by listeners. Our informed and informative panel addresses issues with thought, wit, and aplomb. Voted best of the web 2 years running. Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved, immortal beings, and good-looking people. Remember, you're good-looking. Joe is looking for and finding the good. We found good in abundance, overflowing. Our cup runneth over with good, because this is the most dynamic, positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant podcast in the entire internet regarding what I consider the most important, valuable institution left in our changing world. And I'm going to, first of all, welcome our panel, because I want to say a special thanks to them. They make the time, the effort, and the thoughts to be able to join. And it's not easy because everybody has busy lives and such, but they're here because we all care about this amazing institution called marriage. And we really want to share with people how vital and important it is to our culture. So we'll start where we will start. What's up in the Northwest? Yes, the great Northwest with our wonderful dynamic Dr. Diane Medved. Thank you. And now we'll go to the Southeast and we'll meet our wonderful ambassador of happiness, Maura Sweeney. And then we'll go down to the Southeast. No, that was the Southeast. Yeah, what is it? This is the West, the Southwest. Thank you. The deep Southwest, and right by the beach, and its wonderful wife expert, Lori McDermott. And then we'll go into the deep desert with me, Barry Shore, outside of one of the most famous cities in the world, Las Vegas. And it is an interesting place, but it is the desert, and it's so fascinating. So we're going to start today, and I hope we have a very controversial and interesting show, because I'm going to get on my soapbox first for a couple of minutes. And I'm going to make a couple of categorical statements. One of them is that our country, the United States of America, is embroiled and roiled in a culture war. It's not the first time in our history, but it is really a culture war at the moment. And there are a great deal of malign forces that are tearing at the very fabric of our society and the values that we all thought we held dear. And yet in the past decade or two or three have come under attack and are causing great rifts in society. Interestingly enough, from my perspective, I think one of the only institutions left in our country that could possibly save the republic is marriage. It's not the government. The government will not be able to help. First of all, the government is never an agency for helping individual people. The government is supposed to be a servant of the people and not the other way around. But this government today, and again, for the past 10, 20, 30 years, has taken on roles that were not meant for it as a large institution of bureaucracy, and sinking a lot of the values that basic Americans hold dear. Church, and I say church, I mean the church, the synagogue, the mosque, et cetera, will not be able to serve because they have proven during COVID that they were not capable of following through on their own values, and crumbled and crumpled when it came time to really stand up and say, no, this far and no further. So it is, again, up to the individual, the backbone of the great society called America, unique in the world, by the way, in enabling individuals to fulfill their own destiny. But the genius of our system is that individuals choose, for the most part, to unite with other individuals, finding what people call a soulmate, which, by the way, by definition means that people have a soul. but we'll talk about that later. And getting together in a deep, committed relationship, which we call marriage. And I am of the opinion, and it is not humble, I am of the opinion, considered opinion, that it is marriage and marriage alone that will bring our country through these difficult times and hopefully to a greater ability for all people, whatever your desires and choice in life, to thrive. Because marriage is that unique institution that enables two people to become greater than each other. The overworked word called synergy, that the two parts, when they join together, become greater than the individuals. And that's the genius of marriage. Now, if in fact marriage produces progeny, or through either through birth or adoption, so whatever mechanism, then that is a stamp upon the marriage of saying, not only do we believe in each other, but we believe in the future. That's what I think is the genius of children. It is making a statement saying, we believe in the future. And the future of America is in the hands of people who have children, either individually, or they work with other people who have children and become surrogate parents, uncles, aunts, whatever. But they're leading the way with their values to say, this is how we can live a meaningful and fulfilling life. That's my soapbox introduction. So, as I said, I am so appreciative of our panel and of their genius and rooting for this unique institution. I will tell you, we have emails and communication for people all over the world who are applauding this particular podcast, because we are going to be a real podcast, by the way. Right now, we're a webinar, but it's going to be a podcast in the next couple of weeks, and who find great solace in what it is that we offer, and they want to participate. So we probably will set up some sort of chat on WhatsApp so people can communicate and really be involved more than just the once a month. And we can begin to have some dialogue, because we're getting not just a following, but we're urging people to become leaders in themselves. I mean, one of the beautiful aspects, I believe, of marriage is that individuals, when they come together in a great commitment, become leaders. Each person is a leader in the marriage. You don't have to have, well, we are equal, we're partners. You can be a leader and a follower at the same time. And to be able to cultivate that unique ability of leadership in this very wonderful situation called marriage, where somebody can go outside of the home and become a leader in their community, a leader in their work. And leaders are often marked not of how they speak, but how they act, how they behave. And people watch other people. And when people act with integrity and follow through in their values, and don't have to wear their religion or their values on their sleeve, but really make statements that are strong and powerful simply by the way they speak, by the way they behave, by the way they interact with other people. And that is nurtured in the home. And the home is the domain of marriage partners. Now, I'm a great believer in man and wife, but it doesn't matter. From my perspective, marriage is two people committed together for a life of growth. And at the moment, one of the great aspects of marriage, as I said, is having progeny in any aspect whatsoever, naturally, adopted, surrogate, whatever the situation. And because of the malign forces in America today, children are the target of, again, what I call malign forces. And I'll give you an example, and we'll talk about it because there's a lot of questions. I hope I can frame them efficiently and sufficiently so that they become questions, and you each can comment on them. it is well known throughout history in authoritarian regimes that the first and best way to take over adults is through children. It was very common in East Germany that children were used to tell on their parents if they were in line. It was done in the Hitler Youth prior to that. It was done in Soviet Russia in what they call the Commissar. Commissar, right. And there's a very famous story. It may be apocryphal, but I think it's true, that in the late 20s, early 30s, after Lenin died and Stalin became the father of all of Russia, the father figure. There were pictures of Stalin everywhere. And I can vouch for some of this, by the way. I know I'm going a little long in the tooth, but I'm going to tell you something. In my wonderful misspent youth, so I spent a number of years living in Europe. And I was mostly in Amsterdam. I'm basically an old hippie, and I was a young hippie then. And we traveled around all over, and we were able to go to places in those days, Yugoslavia, we used to call it. It was Yugoslavia. And then, bless you, she's sneezing on the truth. And we even went into Albania, which was forbidden, but we did it. But in Yugoslavia, and at that time still, in the late 60s, there were pictures of Tito everywhere. Hello? Well, why not? He's the guy in charge. So in Russia, Soviet Russia, there were pictures of Stalin everywhere. And I'm not talking about little pictures, I'm talking pictures. So when children were brought into school and they were fed by the state, there's a very interesting, important point. Food was never prepared at home by family for kids to take to school. That's so American. I mean, the thought of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, even with the crust cut off by certain mothers, and go to school with that and milk and such. But the idea of being fed at school was just, that was the Soviet way. That wasn't the American way. But suffice it to say, kids still in the 20s and 30s have been raised in what we'll call religious homes. So they would fold their hands and pray. And there were monitors going around with rulers and hitting kids who would do that and say, no, we don't do that here. See that picture? That's who you thank. You thank Father Stalin for the food. You don't thank God. I mean, just, hello, how ancient. And this was, by the way, in Soviet Russia, which the church was very much a part of the system. But they gave themselves up. Again, I told you, the churches are not going to be the salvation for anything because they're too easy to become subservient to the state. But it was kids who were told, you thank Father Stalin for the food. Now you do that long enough, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 30 years, 50 years in this case, 60 years. And guess what? People might even believe it. Okay, that's what's happening in America today. Obviously not with pictures of Joe Biden or anything like that. But the point is that kids are the tip of the spear. That's where the battle is. And one of the questions that's coming up, and I'm telling you, probably 300. And they all revolve around this basic question, which I hope I can articulate well or well enough, is that the following. I send my kids to public school. In public school, they are being taught things that I can't believe when my kids tell me that they're being taught them. This is what people are writing. And what do I do? My kids are being taught that there's no such thing as boy and girl, that there's this thing called whatever you want to be. I mean, those are my words, but I got a lot of that. So the question to our panel is, and we'll start with Dr. Diane Medved, our leadoff batter, because she's so good at this. Diane, is it true that there are only two, I don't know if you want to use gender, sex, boy and girl, and that to teach boys and girls differently is, I'm sorry, I'm going to use this term because it was in at least 55 emails we got, a form of child abuse. I'm going that radical.
Okay, so the question is, by teaching children that there is gender fluidity, are teachers abusing children?
Yes, that's the question.
Okay, I think that there's a wide variety of what kids are taught, and it certainly varies by the grade the kids are in and where the school is. And I think that it's very hard to generalize like that. We certainly see in the news every day stories about this. And of course, it would make any parents afraid. If a child comes home and says there are lots of genders, then the parent has an opportunity to re-educate in the way that that parent knows. And the parent can easily say, well, biologically, there are two genders. You know, I mean, there's the one with the circle and the one with the X. The point is that it's easy to discuss that, and you can give your own perspective. I have to say, if a parent is surprised that the child comes home and starts talking that way, then the parent hasn't been paying attention. And I urge every parent to get involved with your own child's education. Every day, when my kids were young and they would go to the public school nearby for part of the day, I would walk them to school and talk to the teacher every day. I'd take the kid into the class early and I'd talk to the teacher every day. And I let my kids walk home by themselves because that was their sign of independence. But I made sure that I had contact with the teacher. And I think that every parent has an opportunity. Teachers are not the enemy. Teachers are also in a position where sometimes they're told to impart things with which they may have questions and problems. So I think that you as a parent can support the teacher by discussing your own values with him or her, and that you can share with that teacher what's important to you for your child. And so by all of a sudden getting a surprise, I found out today that my kid's teacher, first of all, it may or may not be age appropriate. That has to be determined. Secondly, it has to be what was the context? What actually happened? It could be that the kid was on the playground and another kid said something and it was not delivered by the teacher and it was not part of the school curriculum. So I think you have to be very clear about what happens and not get upset immediately, but instead say, I'm going to have an inquisitive point of view. I'm going to reserve judgment until I find out the details of what's going on. And I think that your job as a parent is to be your child's advocate and spokesperson to the school if you have any questions, if you have any problems. But remember, the teacher's your friend. The teacher wants to make sure your child is well educated. And most teachers probably don't like having to discuss gender at all. That's not why they're there. They want your child to be able to read and write, do arithmetic, understand history, the history of our country. Now, you may have problems with some of the ways that some of these teachers talk about. That's another opportunity. See it as an opportunity. As a parent, you might want to volunteer to be in the classroom to help the teacher and be there when some of this is imparted or not imparted. You might be relieved, actually, if you go into the classroom and you find out, oh, this isn't such a radical place after all. There are kids from all different backgrounds, and these kids have all different points of view. And yeah, there may be one or two in this corner with whom I disagree, but there's probably 3 or 4 in the other corner with whom I share values. So again, I know it's upsetting to read about this stuff or to have your kid come home and say something, but it's most important to investigate, become involved, and look at the school as a positive for your child and the teacher as someone who wants to be your partner rather than just jumping in and getting all upset.
So I want to applaud you on something because we've had similar questions in the past, and you've answered very similarly that the teacher, no, that it's very important that the teacher is an ally. Don't think of the teacher as an adversary first. Second, and I say this with great love to kids, don't just listen to your kid. It may be that your kid has been mimicking something that somebody else said. You don't, it may not come from the teacher at all, the school. I will say that, yes, it's too easy to be fed horror stories on whatever medium people use to get their information. I will also say that I think, and I, with great fondness, I say this, I think that you are unique and in the very small minority of parents these days who either have the luxury or the ability to walk their kids to school and be involved and such like that. The pressures on the family today for both father and mother or the two parents are such that there is, again, that's part of the breakdown of the societal norms. And I think one of the reasons why marriages have greater challenges today than ever before, because of the stress and strain of time, money, and all these things like that. But to your point, I think it's very important that there should be some involvement so that you don't find out when little Willie at 9 years old comes home and says, well, I really am a girl, or whatever, things like that. I mean, never heard it before, maybe because the parent wasn't listening. So this is a very good point you're making. Well, what I'm saying, I'm just reading hundreds and hundreds of communiques from people saying, I can't even begin to tell you. I mean, I get sometimes 2-3 pages of just email. Okay, people are ranting. But the point is that people are nervous that the place where they entrust their children, and I'm talking about from 5 years old and up, right, are coming back with ideas that seem to be not just not in concert with the home structure, but actually go against it. So, Maura, you're out of the world of having a kid these days in your home, raising her. She's on her own now and such. But by the same token, you see a lot of people, you interact with a lot of people. Do you hear or see that there is and we'll use one for a better term, an attack upon the family structure going for children and using them as the mechanism to create a new world order, as it were? Sorry to use the terms, but the new world order.
I could probably pick up on many of the things, Barry, that you said in your monologue. And I know of them on a personal level. You were speaking historically. We had a number of exchange students with us over the years, one of whom, now again, this is going back in time, was from Soviet Russia, or what used to be Soviet Russia. And she told me that she was being taught in school through I think it was called the Young Pioneers. You
Right.
report on your parents. If your parents are doing something that's inappropriate, you report it to the school or you report it to the organization. Parents used to have to speak over the, what was it? They would be cooking at night. This girl was telling me, and she said they'd have to whisper. Okay, that was one thing. But the idea of telling on each other, I saw when I was down in Cuba, there's always this reporting. I see that methodology taking place here in the United States, specifically over like the past 5 years, even the past 2 years, a lot of which took place during the era of COVID. So I want to answer what Diane was saying and agree. Diane, more than my husband always calls me the ultimate advocate. When it comes to teachers, you're like the advocate. There are so many good teachers out there, and I know of them that have it in their heart to do well and to teach and to instruct and to inspire children, and others who have left teaching, at least here in Florida, because they could not teach any longer as a regular school teacher because so much of the curriculum was getting tied up with things that were not academically oriented, aside from the fact that they were teaching to test, but that's moving to the side. Now, some of the other things I wanted to modify with, I could remember when I went to school and I was growing up, everybody walked to school, everybody could go visit their teacher. Today, let me speak only for Florida and where we live on the West Coast. Children that go to school take a bus. If they don't take a bus, their moms will drive them up. There is a locked door because I am in schools every once in a while. A parent cannot get through the door. So you can't even have the luxury today in our area, for the most part, of speaking with the teachers on an everyday basis, which creates a distance between, and let me say, it creates a distance between the parents and the teachers and the administration. But in addition to that, it also helps fuel the lack of trust. So we have institutionalism and bureaucrats moving in and really creating an incursion into the whole system. Excuse me. And then on the other side, and my daughters reminded me of this. I was very grateful. I was able to stay at home. I was with my daughter. I homeschooled her. I helped my husband out, but I was one of those involved parents. Today, there are couples that can barely afford to have one child. And these are educated couples because everything is so expensive. So for them to even be at home with children, we're in a totally new environment. And I'm sure it depends on where across the United States and where in the world we are. But there are definite changes in terms of what school is all about, what it's geared toward, and what the priorities are. And I don't know, as you were talking, I had this recollection. My mother used to teach kindergarten. And before I even started kindergarten, she invited me in one day. And I was only probably 3 or 4 years old. And I could remember, now I'm dating myself, the kids would come in the morning. They had a morning prayer followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. By the time I ended up like in first grade in public school, there was no more of that. So think about the day. We're now talking about what's your gender. Think about the day when all of a sudden children are going to be told, oh, there's no such thing as God. Now, there's another way that it's kind of going in between what a family and a family's culture believes and what defines the family and where do you cut it off. And I will just say, to finish this off, I'm going on my rant, to cap it off, we have been moving to this environment where it used to be the family structure that counted or mattered as the central structure. And we are very much like Soviet Union. We're very much like the Hitler movement, work with the kids. This was going on in China as well. We're moving to a place where the state becomes mommy and daddy rather than mom and dad being mom and dad.
So I want to emphasize, first of all, thank you so much. I want to emphasize again that this wonderful, amazing podcast is called Marriage with Joy because, first of all, marriage in and of itself, I think, is the great institution that's going to save us or not. And to have marriage with joy is really going to be the key, because if it's just marriage, okay, we got a shot. You do it with joy, it will make it happen because it becomes infectious. See, this kind of infection pushes aside all that other stuff. There's nothing that can stand up against joy in any situation. But when you have a marriage and a home environment that is permeated with joy, which is, by the way, what I experienced at school. I mean, granted, I'm older than everybody here. Was it great to not have to go to school on snow days? If anybody knows what that means. Yeah. Was it great to be sick once in a while? Yeah. But you know something? A day or two, forget it. I want to go back to school. That's what my friends are. That's what we do things. That's what things are happening. Okay, did I enjoy school because we were smart? And so, okay, fine, beside the point. But you play ragtag, you do big games, you play, you pull, you make. Wow, that's life. It seems today, and I'm going to use what you mentioned, wonderful Maura. You use this in fascinating word, whisper. We don't understand it yet, but it's happening more and more. That is exactly the words that were used about Soviet Union and Cuba. Yes. And right now there is a young man in Soviet prison that can't get out. He can't be released, right? He's a Wall Street Journal reporter. Evan speaks Russian. He knew that he was outspoken because he was fluent in Russian. He was speaking to people. What he forgot, he said, his parents said, what he forgot was that it's still a whisper state. That was the words. It's still, yes. See, we think, oh, Soviet Russia, the former Soviet Union, it's still a whisper state. And when you get, that's right, you speak out too much, And that's why they got him. Now, of course, he's a pawn and he's being used for certain things. But the point is that this is not, the United States is different. But what's happening here, and again, I have lots of letters about this, is that children are being asked to talk about their parents at school. You hear this? And not meaning, gee, tell me about mommy and daddy. What does mommy, daddy do? And things, you always used to bring that in. My dad does this, mom does this. No, about what do your parents think about LGBTQ, SUV? I mean, stuff. So it is creating what you said, Maura, a lack of trust because it's driving a wedge into the family unit. And there is nothing that can save this country except for good marriage, for good homes. Everything else is going to go away. And it'll be a battle. If marriage can be maintained with joy in an atmosphere of reaching out to other married people and sharing and creating what I call a tsunami of goodness, we will win. But if that goes away, there's no hope. Because there's no seawall. There's nothing that will stop the forces of being overpowered. So wonderful, Lori, you live in Southern California, which, let's be blunt, is a hotbed of radicalism, at least the way it appears from the press and anything that people want to think about, and especially in the greater Los Angeles area. What your children are not so much, they're still children, but they're not young, they're not toddlers. Your children, what are they experiencing at school that causes you consternation, if anything?
I feel like it's calmed down a lot. I have a sophomore in public school. I do feel like it's not as bad as it was. I mean, there were some heated school board meetings where people were just screaming at each other, and we just had a new election, and the people who were in got back in. It was a very strange thing. I mean, there was one team who was trying to get in and change things, and there was another team who all kind of clicked together and just agreed with spending millions and no one checking, no one doing anything, and they still are there. But because this new crowd couldn't get in, this was the same. But because there was so much uproar, these people had to shift a little bit. And that's what's happened. And so I haven't really heard much. The kids, I will say, which I thought was really cool, because my kids went to a Catholic school. They did prayer. We did Pledge of Allegiance. And when like a bully thing would happen at that school, it was kind of hidden. And I was like, wait, what? Let's fix this. Let's fix this. So it was very parent driven. If the parent didn't say anything, it kind of was just shoved under the rug. Let's just let it go. At the public school, my son was with his friends and called his friend jokingly a name, laughing. And a teacher walked out of her room and said, what are you doing? And she pulled him and she took him to the principal's office with his friends. And my son said, oh, but I was just joking. And she goes, that's not tolerated. And I was like, yes, yes. And she called me to tell me my son called another child a name who's his best friend, and they were just joking. But it's not okay at school. And my son went to detention. And my son's like, but I was just joking. I'm like, but you can't do that. You cannot treat people badly in a big school because that's bullying and that's not okay. And so I sided with the teacher and the principal and the vice principal on that. And I was so glad to see they have shifted into focusing more on raising kids that are smarter and not to be so asinine. So that's my latest thing. But last year during our talks here, I was like, I can't believe they're doing this. I can't believe they're doing this. And it's just kind of this year, it's just kind of shifted.
So do you see, or are you telling us the pendulum has swung a little bit?
Yeah. So when you the LGBTQ part, here's what I think, right? I think during the past 10, 15 years, people work in the government. Like most of us who go to college, who are educated, we don't jump out of college and go work for the government. But a lot of people who are struggling and not sure what to do, they end up in those jobs. And I only know this because I've been doing research on it lately. So they end up in these jobs, and maybe they're gay, maybe they're not gay. They've gotten in the underbelly of supporting a government, and they have these opinions about their sexuality or what their feelings are, which it should be. I am gay, and I want to make sure that I deserve healthcare, I deserve this, I deserve that, as they should, right? And there's been this like, we are important. Let's make a movement. And it happened. And I feel like now, if you were saying to my son anything about gay, he'd be like, yeah, he's gay. So what? Like, it's
Right.
like, whatever,
Sure.
whatever. Back in our day, one of my girlfriends whose son is a son now and was a girl, 22, had a sex change just recently. And my friend in Chicago is struggling with that. Like, still cries that her daughter became a boy. And me in California, I'm like, yeah, I know plenty of kids who've done that. And the parents have approved, and it's okay. But so I've got a couple things to say. So that to me is like just generational. We've kind of grown up in that, like, some people have this and some people are struggling with it. We're not going to judge them anymore. We're going to see them as human, and we're going to allow them to be who they want to be. Now, taking children who are 6 and a teacher thinks maybe they're gay, I'm going to secretly talk to them and pull them out and go see about getting them therapy to change. That to me is child abuse, because as a parent, you can't let your kid go on a field trip without signing all this paperwork. But yet they're going to take our kid and go have a private conversation about their body. What? That's not okay. Like, if these teachers are going to talk to my kid about their menstrual cycle, I've got to sign off on that. So somewhere, there's something screwed up that needs to be fixed. And they haven't figured it out yet, but they will. I believe there's enough people going, no. But I also believe, why did this happen? It happened because those people in government who might be gay remembered when they were 10 and thought they were gay, and they had no one to talk to. So they were thinking about themselves as a child, thinking, I struggled when I was 6. I struggled when I was 10, and my parents didn't listen to me. That was 30 years ago. But now these people are in an authoritative position to go, whoa. There are children growing up who might be gay or might want a sex change. We need to take care of them. So there's this like thing that kind of is happening, but I think it's going to get fixed.
Okay, so you are sanguine and hopeful that the societal shift over the next generation will be just as someone calls himself a homosexual, Teddy, and say, yeah, I didn't ask, I saw a big deal, that will be similar to what's going on now. There are 2 points, though, that you made that I want to emphasize, if you would. So you mentioned about your friend's was a son, now a girl, or vice versa. But that person is 22 years old. That person is not 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. I think we are all aware that there are entire departments of major hospitals that are bringing in and advising kids, mostly girls, by the way, who are between the ages of 12 and 17, to go through hormonal change. In other words, puberty blockers, breast removals, surgery, such like that. And to me, that borders on not just child abuse, that is absolutely beyond understanding in terms of, like my wife told me the other day, isn't the first rule of a doctor, first do no harm? I said, yes, that used to be the Hippocratic Oath, right? Now it's the Hippocratic Oath. That's what I told her. That was making it funny. But it hurts. So this is a great segue. But so I want to make mention to what you said, is that you're right. There are a lot of people who are, for want of a better term, okay, so they were homosexuals or whatever it was, and they had difficulties. And now they're in places of authority, and they don't want to have other people go through the same thing. But we're now talking about sex change for underage kids. As a friend of mine said recently, I don't know what is true, but he told me, so I'm assuming he knows what he's talking about. He says you can't, you know what vaping is, the smoking stuff, vape. You can't vape until you're 18, but you can get these puberty blockers at 16 or 14 or 15.
It doesn't make any sense. It's wrong.
Yeah, right. So
wrong.
something is wrong. So now let's go back to our premise, though, for our podcast, because we're not here to bitch and moan about the state of society, everything's falling apart. On the contrary, remember the whole point of this podcast is marriage with joy. What do we do in our marriages to make sure that we're imparting to our children or the people that are in our care as underage people under the age of 18, that the values of, like you say, we don't joke around and hurt somebody, even if it's just, you think it's just joking, that we are imparting to them values that we're here to listen. We're here to help. We're here to support you in the most positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant way. Now, if that means puberty blockers, maybe, but there may be many other things to do before that. Hear what I'm saying? In other words, part of the reason we get so many letters from parents, concerned parents, and saying, what do we do? They're my kids. Now, I will say to you those words I just said. People say they're my kids. There is an entire movement right now in the United States to say, oh, yeah? Who said they're your kids? Do you hear what I'm saying? Who said they're your kids? This is akin to Soviet Union, East Germany, et cetera, et cetera. The inference is that the state has as much right in your progeny as you do. Just because you gave birth or they're raised in your home doesn't mean that you are the arbiter. And this is where the battle is, in my humble opinion, which is not so humble. My opinion that it's the family unit versus the state. And by the way, this is not the first time this ever happened. As I said, this is Hitler Youth, this is East Germany, this is Communist, this is Chinese, Communist China. Everywhere there's an authoritarian regime, this is the battle, because if you can get the children, you win. Whoever has the children wins. If we can impart values of love and harmony and caring and being open and discussing with children and raising them as young adults, well, guess what? We win. If you can impart to people as young adults that the best thing to do is make sure that you tell us if somebody is telling you, well, climate change is not a problem. Do you know, by the way, do you know that there's something called climate anxiety these days? It is, Diane, you're going to love this. They're trying to get it into your, the big book with as a real something to be talked about. Climate anxiety. So what is climate anxiety in essence? In essence, it's the state or the mechanism of the state making people who are easily influenced, i.e. children, to believe that there is imminent danger and destruction unless we do something, whatever it is that we do. And if your parents are not going along with the program, you hear this? Then we need to know. So we only have a few minutes left. Can you believe that? Let's discuss this whole idea of, I'll bring it to you, Diane, to speak first. Children telling other adults who are not their parents about what their parents speak about. In other words, I'm going to say it like this. I'm not a climate disaster denier, but I am. In other words, I do not only believe, I know for facts, I study it, that we are not on the edge of doom. Now, if I had if my kid was now 7, 8 year old, went to a school and he said, what is my father he doesn't believe that stuff. Ooh, really? So what is your belief vis-a-vis children being asked to tell about what their parents talk about?
Well, obviously, I find it horrifying that a child should impart any information about their parents to anyone out in their family. I mean, I think it's wrong and it's destructive to the family. Okay, and also it's not Jewish because we have certain values that greatly discourage speaking anything about anyone, especially if it's not true. But even if it is true, you don't talk about other people's beliefs or other people's behaviors or other people's anything. You stick to improving yourself. You stick to talking only about yourself and only the things that are relevant. And I think that the value, it's called Lashon Hara. That means an evil tongue, that using the power of speech, which is uniquely human and uniquely precious, for a purpose that is destructive. And I think that we need to teach our children the value of our words. And as parents, that's something you can do. Talk about what words can do. Words can hurt and they can help. And words can talk about people, which is not the best use of them, or they can talk about ideas, or they can talk about aspirations, or they can talk about things that are admirable to uplift the quality of your life. So I think talking about words, talking about what's appropriate to say and what's not appropriate. It's important that your children understand that parental comments or beliefs are not something that they should be sharing with others. I mean, really, really strict about that and saying it outright and repeating it often, that what we believe and think about in our family is something that we talk about all the time together. But we don't just bring it outside to other people or to other environments. It's our belief system, and we consider it precious and important and the source of what makes us close. And if they realize that the love of their family is based on their words, then they will prize them more. And so they will want more love and they will want more closeness. And I think that that's the way to deal with it. And so we have something precious and positive, and that is how we communicate. The things that we choose to say and the things we choose not to say, and the things that we share with each other and the things that we only share with each other and not with other people. So parents have an opportunity and an obligation to let their children know what's proper to say and what's not.
This is very wonderful. I'm going to unpack and repeat a few things. It's the improvement of self. This is an interesting dilemma, and I think actually have a lot of questions that we got about it and want to talk about probably the next episode, is the desire to improve society versus the desire to improve oneself. Because oftentimes they clash. And it's people who want to, let's go and change the world. Okay, let's start with one being like me. I got a big challenge here, but you're right. They use these words for aspiration and admirable situations. What you mentioned, Lori, about your son, again, even in jest, it's great for him to have found out that's just not the best use of language. And he learned in a very easy way instead of getting hit by a 2x4 from his friend. But it's a wonderful thing to be able to utilize language in the most positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant way. And again, that's what marriage with joy is all about, how we speak with our partner and ourselves. So the best modeling for kids is how mom and dad work with each other. And so we don't necessarily just say, this is what we do. We say that this is what we do because this is what we do. It's not, don't just watch me. Don't just listen to me. Maura, we only have a few minutes left.
I know. And there's so much here. There's so much here.
Okay.
I want to say in this case, my answer always comes to the same place, similar to what Diane's saying. The answer to everything is we can only do what we can do where we are, where we live in our own situation. That means that we want to be the best model we can at home for our children. We set the tone at home. We model everything. It's love, it's trust, it's confidence, it's speaking good things to each other. So absolutely, I think that that's like the most powerful antidote to maybe things that are going on in society. At the very beginning of this, There were two words I wrote down as you were giving your monologue. We have all yielded. We've yielded and we've defaulted over the course of decades to what we perceive to be the experts, whether they're running a country, running a school, running an institution. And yet I've often asked, how many of these people do we know about their background? Do we know if they're happy at home? Do we know what they're like with their spouse? Do we know what their kids are like? And yet we'll give all that up to say, oh, they have the position, we must obey. Now, I'm speaking to us as the adults, as the parents. How much more do you suppose that happens to children when they're in a classroom? So I'd say the most powerful antidote is what we do with what we've got, where we are, wherever we are in life. And we look to be the best person, the best parent, the best model that we can be. And one more thing, if I could add, because I said it to my husband earlier. There were years ago when I was raising my daughter, I was involved with a couple of groups. One in particular, they were mothers across America. They were going to save America. And I remember they wanted me to be more involved. And I said, you know something, right now, I left a career. I'm with a young daughter. It's my responsibility to put her first and my immediate family first. When she's grown up and when she gets older and I have more time, I can go out and save the world with everybody else. But if I can't set my own home and my daughter in order so that when she grows up, she could stand on her own 2 feet, then I've lost. And I think there's something to be said about the microcosm that each one of us sets up in our own home as a parent, as a spouse, and we work on that little nucleus. And this goes right back to what you said at the beginning. We do that and we become lights in the world, to the world, and we've got joy and we're abounding in ways other people would appreciate. I hope I didn't take, no, Lori, there's time for you.
That's
Okay,
great.
wonderful, wonderful, Lori. Where would you like to have your closing statement? Talk to us. What is it about this process of speaking about, in other words, if somebody asks, what do your parents think about climate change and such?
Yeah, it's when you asked me that question before, I thought we were doing something about school in my head. That's why I answered it that way. But when you tie it into the family, what I'm finding out, like the whole TikTok movement, it's almost like our kids are becoming followers instead of leaders. And I really have taken a strong hold when we sit around together or talk as a family or have dinner together. I ask my kids their opinion about stuff. My older one kind of skated through COVID and he's already okay. But my younger ones are just like, I don't know what my teacher says. It's like, what do you think? What's your thoughts? And when kids have watched TikTok, they've done some studies on it because I'm an advocate for that, pulling it because they get lost in just following. And when they come up for air and someone says, what do you think? They're like, I don't know. And I would rather raise kids who have opinions, even if they're against me. I'm okay with that. I want kids to learn how to, what do you think? Do you think that's right? Do you think climate change is right? Do you think your parents should be together? This morning, I had a conversation with a teenager who wants her parents to stay married. And she's like, what do I do? And I'm like, and I gave her some thoughts and suggestions. And she was all in. And it was the cutest thing. And I complimented her because it's like, oh, my parents are getting divorced. Okay, well, maybe there's something you can do to aid it in your small little space as a kid, still being a kid without taking on an adult role. These are kids we want. Remember, like a box. It's like, here's the box. Let me put you in the box. It's like, well, who's teaching our kids to think outside the box? Nobody. And I think that's where we're failing. And I think families can do more of empowering your kids or asking them, what are your thoughts about that? I just got in a car accident. What do we do? Who do we call? My tire just blew. What do you think, son? What do you think, daughter? What's your opinion? They'd be like, I don't know. Well, what would you do if I wasn't here? Right? Challenge our kids.
Excellent. So as we started out, when I was on my soapbox, as I mentioned to you, the only group of people in this country that can save this country are people involved in a committed marriage. We are the salvation, not just of the United States, of the world. The world is moving towards authoritarianism, and it's not healthy. It's not healthy for individuals, not healthy for families. Marriage with joy potentially can produce not just healthy young people and adults, but leaders. Like you said, leaders in their own right, that they think like a leader, that they act like a leader, because that's what we've modeled for them. Like you say, what do you think? Well, I don't know. Well, let's think it through. Tell me, what do you think? And if you engage younger people in the process of thinking, and they see around them the potential, let's be blunt. Every marriage is not like Barry Shore all day long, tiptoeing through the tulips and the roses. Hello, life is real. It's an ebb and a flow. And that's the genius of it, right? It's marriage with joy. Joy stands for journey of you. But if we keep this in perspective, guess what happens? We get flooded with letters from all over the world telling people saying, I need more of you. That's what they want to say about us. So again, a huge thank you to wonderful Dr. Diane Medved, fabulous Maura Sweeney, Laurie McDermott, and your humble host, Barry Shore. And we are just so truly honored and humbled that you listen and you share and you're interested, and we're here to be of benefit and service. And I do trust, and I'm telling you, we're making a difference. So on that high note, as we say on every show, we're going to do a group hug, and we're going to give you a blessing. Hug stands for, of course, heartfelt, unlimited giving. So let me give the blessing first, then we'll do the hug. The blessing is go forth, live exuberantly, spread the seeds of joy, happiness, peace, and love. And here's our hug. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, wonderful ones. Best wishes. We love you. Bye. Welcome to Marriage with Joy, which is the most open discussion on the internet about the positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant aspects of living in harmony with matrimony. Marriage with Joy unabashedly discusses the most interesting questions raised by listeners. Our informed and informative panel addresses issues with thought, wit, and aplomb. Voted best of the web 2 years running.